Today I get to review a tribute album that really honors and respects one of the greatest, and some say the greatest metal vocalist of all time, Mr. Ronnie James Dio. I'm Chainsaw, and this is my review of the brand new tribute album for Ronnie James Dio, entitled This Is Your Life. Make sure you check the description for more reviews of this very special album from other reviewers. I'm doing a collaboration with them because this, like I said, is a special album, so make sure you check the description. Also, I do want to mention I have the computer in front of me because there's so many bands and so many covers that it's easily you can get confused with talking about this album, so I wanted to make sure I didn't screw anything up. Anyways, let's talk about This Is Your Life. Now, I remember hearing about this tribute album, I think about 2012, which is 2 years ago before this album was released, and there was talks of, like, Metallica, Anthrax, Rob Halford, Motorhead. There was just all these talks about different bands and different individuals involved with the tribute album, but then all of a sudden, with all this news being announced and all these rumors, then it just kind of just stopped. And we were like, what happened to that tribute album? Is it not going to happen? And then they said, oh, by the way, early 2014, with like basically almost a year of no news, tribute album. It's going to come out for Ronnie James Dio. And it's finally here upon us April 1st on April Fool's Day. That's very interesting. But anyways, it's finally here for us. So let's talk about this tribute album. I'm just going to get right into the actual track listing itself because that's the main portion of this, and talk about, did the band succeed in what they were trying to do by honoring and respecting Ronnie James Dio, or did they fail? And I'm going to give you a spoiler alert. They didn't fail, in my personal opinion. This is a great tribute album, but let's talk about some of the actual tracks itself. Now, the first thing I do want to get into talking about is the 3 tracks they threw on here for the covers that have already been released, because the majority of this album is unreleased covers of like a full band, a Metallica's medley, or it's a band with a couple other individuals, or kind of these different individuals from different groups coming together to make a super group in a way to kind of cover. So on top of that, we have these 3 covers that have already been released. They're just throwing onto the mix, and I was just wondering why that is. And the 3 covers, of course, that have already been released that are just thrown into the mix are The Mob Rules from Adrenaline Mob, Egypt, The Chains Are On from Doro, hope I'm saying that correctly, and Holy Diver from Killswitch Engage. And of course, the final track is This Is Your Life from actual Ronnie James Dio, the actual man himself. But the 3 covers I just mentioned before that, I was wondering why they did that, because I've heard these covers before in, different times when they came out, or, I came across them on YouTube or whatever, and I was just wondering why they threw them into the mix, because was there some issues with other bands that the covers didn't really come out like they wanted to, or they couldn't do them or something? But I was hoping that if this was going to be a very, big tribute album for Ronnie James Dio, and the 100% of the proceeds are going to go to a cancer fund for Ronnie James Dio, of course, then I was just kind of wondering why this is not a 100% minus the actual This Is Your Life song from Dio, not a 100% brand new covers. I don't know, I just wanted to talk about it, I just wanted to mention it because it was kind of an issue. It's not a gripe and a negative for the album because the covers are good, but I was just wondering why there's old covers thrown into the mix with all these brand new covers. Just don't know why, but it is what it is. Anyways, let's talk about some of my favorite covers and how they sounded, and basically overall how this album was to me, because it really blew me away. Anyways, the actual album opens up with Neon Nights from Anthrax, and I felt like Anthrax did a great job with this. Joey did an amazing job with his vocals. The rest of the band sounds great. The guitar work, the drum work, the bass work, all sounds good and up to par with the original. Doesn't overpower and does not exceed past the original, but I felt like that they took the cover and had some moments where it sounded like the original, and they kind of, kept it that way. But on other instances, they really made it their own and made it sound more Anthrax, to where it's the influence, because I think a good cover is not to copy exactly to the T of the original, but kind of make it sound like their own, but of course not, basically make it try to make it sound better than the original, because that's a wrong way, that's a negative way to go down for covers, to try to outdo the original. It's kind of to try to make it as your own, but also keep some of the original influence and some of the original concept inside your actual cover. And I felt like Anthrax did it that way, and I felt like it was a great job for them. So the next track I'm going to talk about is the Last in Line track 2 from Tenacious D. And the reason why I felt like this was kind of interesting is because Tenacious D is known for the comedy and known for being a comedy type metal group. But of course, they've mentioned several times Ronnie James Dio was in the Tenacious D, The Pick of Destiny movie. But they're more of like, they write comedy type tracks for metal and all this other stuff. So it's kind of interesting to see them step outside of that comedy realm, that comedy box that Tenacious D is in, and do a cover for Ronnie James Dio. But of course, as we all know, they love and respect him for many different reasons. And they did a great job with this cover. The guitar sounded great. Jack Black's vocals did really good. I felt like his range really fitted the song, so there wasn't any two moments where he's going insanely high. But I felt like the cover was good nonetheless. Now, the next one I'll get to is one of my personal favorite tracks of all time from Ronnie James Dio, and that is the famous Rainbow in the Dark. I just love that song to death for everything involved within that track. The solo, the vocals from Ronnie James Dio, the chorus line, the verses, everything about that song, I love to death. So when I heard they were going to cover this and Corey Taylor from Slipknot and Stone Sour is going to be on vocals, I was thinking, okay, is he going to go in the Slipknot route with the more raspy and growly vocals, or is he going to stick with singing and do the honor of trying to do Ronnie James Dio with singing? And that's the way he went, and I'm very glad that he did. The cover, like with minusing the vocals, the actual guitar sound and bass and drums and all that good stuff involved with Rainbow in the Dark sounds very up to the point of what the original was. There isn't really too much change. It's, of course, heavied up, of course, but it's not to the point where it sounds way too heavy to where it doesn't have that, epic vibe, of course, like the intro to Rainbow in the Dark did, but it is definitely heavied up, and I feel like Corey did an amazing job with it. And I felt like that the musicianship and the solo was very, very good. So I really enjoyed that this cover alone, just talking about this one of my favorite tracks ever, came out as it did, because if it didn't come out as good as it actually is, I would be kind of like, oh man, like they kind of missed it. They kind of missed the point of the song, but I feel like they did a really good job for what it is. But Corey did a good job. That was the main thing, because Corey's vocals are not that high, but I think he did good for what he did. So props to Corey Taylor for attempting Rainbow in the Dark, and my personal opinion succeeded with honoring Ronnie James Dio in the way. Now, the next one we're going to talk about is track number 6, Motorhead with Biff Byford. A kind of a combination. Biff Byford, of course, the vocalist from Saxon, who has an amazing high voice, with, of course, the legendary Motorhead. And it's really cool to see Motorhead kind of take this really very catchy and interesting song from Ronnie James Dio discography and really pull it out and basically keep some of those essence like Anthrax did with Neon Nights, but kind of make it sound like Motorhead, and that Motorhead-esque with that very fast-paced aggressiveness. And Biff Byford doing the verses and the choruses, and then Lemmy, of course, coming in, doing back vocals and kind of going back and forth with Biff Byford on the choruses. I think that was very interesting, because if Motorhead's going to do a cover, I mean, Lemmy's got to do some vocals, and I think it was kind of interesting that they took Biff Byford, who has those amazing high vocals, and made him do the verses and choruses, because if Lemmy was doing 100% the vocals, his vocals are not that high. It'd be really low, and it would just maybe kind of sound like it's Motorhead song more than in a cover. It may just sound completely different, but the fact that they got Biff Byford to do these vocals made the song worthwhile, and like I said, Motorhead made it sound like Motorhead in a sense, so it was a good cover overall. Now, of course, I'm talking about the actual new tracks itself. So, Catch the Rainbow from Glenn Hughes and a bunch of other guys came together. Simon Wright, Craig Goldy, Rudy Sarzo, and Scott Warren, of course, came together to do Catch the Rainbow, which is a very slow and interesting track. And I felt like the vocals is the main thing I wanted to focus on, because the vocals in that song are very interesting and very unique in a sense. And I felt like Glenn Hughes did a great job. I feel like he really captured that Ronnie James Dio type-esque and really pushed his vocals and really did some very great vocal work. And I feel like the rest of the band sounded great. It sounded like the original in ways, and I feel like that they really made it to, they really wanted to make sure that this cover wasn't trying too hard to sound like the original, but they were like trying to keep those epic moments within the track to kind of, transition over to the actual cover itself. But I'm glad that they didn't try too hard to sound very melodic and pulled back and peaceful. They just I feel like they kind of went it their own way. Of course, it ends up sounding like the original in ways, but I feel like the cover did what it was supposed to do. It's not trying too hard, but it's not failing at the same time. It's basically in that middle realm where it's supposed to be, because this is one of those tracks that is, I think, in my personal opinion, one of the harder tracks that was covered on this actual album itself, because there are some songs from Ronnie James Dio that are probably never going to get covered because they're very unique and interesting, and it would just be kind of weird to hear a band cover them. So this is one of those songs that I think they pulled it off, but of course some others may disagree. But I feel like they did it. So, Man on the Silver Mountain, track number 12, with, of course, the legendary Rob Halford. Of course, we have other people from Vinny Ipius. I'm probably saying that wrong. Doug Aldrich. I'm probably saying that wrong too. I'm just trying to name them off. Jeff Pilson and of course Scott Warren again. I feel like Man on the Silver Mountain is one of those other songs. It's not one of my favorite tracks, but it's definitely a very interesting track, just like I was talking about with Catch the Rainbow. But Man on the Silver Mountain, I am just in awe with this song, with this cover, because Rob Halford did an extraordinary good job. He is one of the other legendary vocalists in metal. He is one of those few other vocalists that has been around since basically the beginning of metal, and he still has it. He still has that epicness, and I feel like that he did an extraordinary job with this track because his vocals are still up to par. His vocals, he maybe not did too much highs, but you can definitely tell with age his vocals are not letting down, and you can definitely tell that he really put a lot of work and effort into making his vocal performance to cover Ronnie James Dio with this song, to really sound like Ronnie James Dio in a way, but kind of make it his own, but also show his honor and respect for a guy that he probably loved and probably cared for and probably was his brother. And, you know, it was very, very good to hear this cover because Rob Halford, like I said, is one of the other legendary vocalists, so it was really, really cool to hear him cover Ronnie James Dio because one of the legendary vocalists covering another legendary vocalist song, that's very interesting. It's one of the few times we'll ever get to see it, so I definitely have to give that high praise. I've already talked about Ronnie, the Ronnie Rising medley from Metallica, and of course, This Is Your Life from Dio, the man himself, was a great way to end this album. There's some bonus tracks too, but those I didn't really want to pay attention to because these are the 14 that are picked for the majority of the world to listen to. That's one of the ones I wanted to talk about. Let me set the computer down real quick, guys. And I wanted to end this on a note a little bit differently than I usually do because this is one of those special albums that just really stands out. Because it is a tribute album, yes, but it's one of those few tribute albums that's going to have songs covered and groups being formed together, like Biff Byford and Motorhead, or Rob Halford and a couple other guys thrown into the mix. Or, you know, they're going to have Tenacious D, something like that, where they're going to get a few artists and a few bands that are going to cover an individual's material that we're probably not going to see again. We're probably not going to see another tribute album like this again until maybe, you know, the death of Ozzy Osbourne, which I'm hoping that's not going to happen anytime soon. But I feel like that this is one of those tribute albums that should be heard by anybody who's a fan of Ronnie James Dio, Rainbow, Black Sabbath, Dio, whatever. If you heard of anything that Ronnie James Dio was ever a part of, I highly recommend that you check out this tribute album as soon as you can because it really does showcase the love and honor that these bands and individuals have for Ronnie James Dio and the respect for him. Because the majority of these people involved on this album, or basically all of them, have been influenced in some way or another from Ronnie James Dio. So, I recommend to the full extent that you check out this tribute album as soon as you can. I'm not going to rate this album because I feel like, for me, a rating would basically state how good they did a cover. For me, it's what they put into the actual music itself, what they actually did. I feel like they did an amazing job, so you can take that as you want it. You could say it's a 10 out of 10 for me, but for me, it is one of those special albums that I'm not going to rate because it is up to anyone's interpretation. Of course, that's any album, but this is a tribute album that I'm going to love and respect and care for and listen to from time to time to hear these people really put their mind and soul and their musicianship into covering one of the greatest metal vocalist of all time, Mr. Ronnie James Dio. That is my review, guys. Thank you guys for watching. Once again, check that description for more reviews of this amazing album. And as always, I'm Chainsaw. I'll see you guys later.